What is up, guys? Welcome to another TikToker debate. We have our friends with us here, Karlemmrich. Am I saying that right?
Yes? Emmerich, but it's
Emmerich, whatever. One of those. Yeah, I was close, I think. And mattvs.politics, as I found out last time, that's actually how you say it. I guess I'm bad with screen names here. Shit, maybe I should work on that. But yeah, we are going to be debating. Basically, I guess what constitute conservative ideology, kinda, and if Matt is a conservative for the most part. And we're also going to be debating court packing, if, yay or nay, I suppose. So yeah, I don't want to drag that on too long. Without further ado, I will hand the floor over to you, gentlemen, and ball out.
Do you want to go ahead and start? Oh, yeah, go ahead. I was going to ask.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that I think I think the court packing part is going to be the more fruitful conversation, because if I'm being honest, I don't really care that much about labels. But in terms of whether or not you can be classified as a conservative, I think it's a pretty open and shut case. And I think we only need to look at the argument that we're about to have about court packing, where it's pretty clear you were taking the conservative line of argument in that discussion. And so I think that just within that context, because, all these labels, they're obviously contextual. Labels can change over time. And I think that given the context of what you post and the political climate of TikTok, I think it's appropriate to label you conservative. At the same time, if you don't want to be called conservative, I'm not going to go out of my way to call you conservative. But what do you think?
Yeah. So before I get into the thick of it, I'll say I may be taking a conservative talking point on court packing, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm conservative, especially when court packing is something that is not really liked by people across all sides of the aisle, not just conservatives. But that aside, I did want to talk about this, and I know I know a lot of people may see this part of the conversation like, why is this even important? But I did think it is important for a few reasons, because I think that when people label other people for them and put them in these boxes, it can be really disastrous in certain ways. I don't think you were necessarily trying to do this on purpose, but it does look bad on me, and it confuses people that might listen to my message otherwise, because I do have left-leaning people in my audience, and I want to keep those people, or I want to reach more left-leaning people. But I did think it was very odd that you would try and explain my own ideology to me when I had never said I was a conservative. I've gone against conservatives in the past, and I've actively promoted things on my channel multiple times that wouldn't be considered conservative. So I guess to start off, I'll read a quote. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, is the debate maybe more not so much about what your specific ideology is and kind of what you would say constitute a conservative today? Would we say that's kind of more of what we're kind of point out here?
Well, I just want to say really fast, Matt, I don't know what you personally believe. I'll never know what you believe in your heart, but all I know is what you present, the content that you put out there, and that's more of what I'm speaking to. You can say that you believe anything, and I'll take you at your word, but I'm just more speaking to the content that you put out there.
Yeah, sure, but so even if I put out content, for instance, hold on, let's see, for even my problem with that, what you just said though, is that for instance, I've said I'm generally against the anti-death penalty. I want justice reform. I've gone after voter fraud claims, a lot. I want police reform. I've advocated for public option healthcare, or better education system. Gone after Nick Videos, Cam Higby, conservative talking points, and I don't you've said that multiple times. I only know what you put out, but that is the stuff I'm putting out as well. So I'm really confused what that means necessarily.
Well, so frankly, your bio is I go after lefties, and sometimes I go after people on the right. But I think that you can go after people on either side of the aisle. That doesn't really speak to your ideology, because it depends on the substance of why you're going after them. I might have a different critique of Nancy Pelosi than some conservative Republican does. I think that there's a different. You can go after Nick Videos, but I don't know what specific critiques you're making of Nick Videos. I do know that you put out a video where you said I'm not a Republican, but then you said I'm right leaning, and then you basically listed off a few of the things you believe, and all of those seem pretty, frankly, that those would put you in the conservative side of the aisle. It's not meant to be a pejorative or an insult or anything. It just is a
no. But some people will take that as pejorative, right? There are people on your, and actually we look at I think it's psychology. There's a few studies that show that beforehand, like for a long time, we used to only think that people on the right side of the aisle could have actual prejudice against other people, whether it be like racist type of prejudice or like sexual type of prejudice. And then like new studies have came out in like very, very recent years that show that like now we're starting to find that you can have prejudice against like certain ideologies, and this can come from any side of the aisle. And so I do think it is like important because like certain people do see this as like pejorative, right? But I guess talking like what you had just said right there, I guess we could talk about like, because we, like Driven said, maybe we want to talk a little bit more about like conservatism. One of the things you said, from what I've seen you put out, or you said from what I've seen you put out, you put out content that advances the conservative agenda. I don't know what you personally believe, only what you put out, kind of like what you just said a few minutes ago. But I want to know what you are saying the conservative agenda is, because you also said, obviously it's a bit malleable depending on who you talk to, but the bulk of your content seems to be critiques of the Democrats on the left. And again, this is kind of like something you just said, but I don't know who would qualify the conservative agenda as critiquing the left. I don't see that how like that makes sense.
Well, so for example, you for the vice presidential debate, I believe you only made videos criticizing Kamala Harris. You didn't make any videos about Mike Pence, and I think that Mike Pence said some absurd things in there. And you can say that you do disagree with things that Mike Pence said, but that's what I'm saying. It's just about the content that you put out there. And so you can maybe have problems with like maybe the things that Trump says in terms of voter fraud, but like I don't think that that's necessarily ideological. I think that that's more just Trump is insane and is saying insane things about voter fraud. I don't think that makes you not a conservative.
Yeah. Hold on one second. Well, I mean, that's why I also wrote. I had also said here that even if I do like give right-leaning takes on my channel, I do like qualify that. Like for instance, whether it's like death penalty or whatever, if if I'm giving like a more right-leaning take, I do qualify that to like make it a little, even as much as I can, a little more down the middle. For instance, like what you just said about Kamala Harris, when I was criticizing her during the vice presidential debates, I'm pretty sure in those videos I also said that like I really don't like Pence that much. I think Pence is kind of lame, but I also said that it's not this just objective looking. This didn't have anything to do with like who I have bias for. Just objective, like listen. Oh, he just dropped out,
and he's gone, and he's back.
Are you there?
You back?
Hey, everything okay there?
Yeah.
Did I drop out?
Yeah, you dropped out.
All right, that was weird. I don't know what happened. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say I was almost done. I was just gonna say, even in those videos, I said just from an objective standpoint, from where I was listening, it just seemed Kamala won. That's not even like a conservative take. That's just saying I think Kamala lost. That's what I meant to say. That's just like an objective, like what I thought I heard. It didn't even have to do with like, because I thought a lot of the takes that Pence gave during the vice presidential debate, they were pretty bad, but they like rhetorically were much better than what Kamala was doing. So like even that, like it doesn't really hold water.
I definitely agree that we can separate whether or not someone performatively, says something during the debate, like how well someone is at presenting their ideas versus the actual substance of what they're saying. But I still think, I've said multiple times that you consider yourself right-leaning. I don't even understand what the problem is here. Conservative, right-leaning. I mean, colloquially, we use those terms pretty interchangeably, do we not?
I'm going to appeal to the authority in my head that says no. I don't ever like think of it that way, and I've never heard of anyone saying that like that. Like
you don't think that right-leaning and conservative are used interchangeably?
No, generally maybe like 800 people can stand that.
The same way that like liberal and progressive are used interchangeably. I mean, for the most part, I agree that they have different definitions, but those definitions change over time. That's why you have people who call themselves classical liberal, but then some people think liberal means like.
Well, I mean, like, I even then I think most people understand that like especially when you're. Let me say it like this: to people who are not like really politically sound and like don't do what we do. Like on a day-to-day basis, of course, like right-leaning, conservative, they're going to be interchangeable. Liberal, progressive, of course, those are going to be interchangeable. But for people like us who like actually like understand what the difference is between a liberal and progressive, or understand the difference between like a libertarian and conservative, I don't think people really think of these interchangeably. Like when you think of like people on the right, you have numerous ideologies on the right. You have neocon, paleocon, libertarianism, classical liberalism, like centrism, etc. Like these are things that like tend to lean more right in nowadays. And like generally, when you say right leaning, at least maybe this is how other people different from how other people think. I'm thinking like just barely right leaning, like actually leaning to the right, not necessarily like full blown neoconservative. And so I don't know if I would agree with that at all.
I mean, frankly, I didn't call you like a neocon or anything. I just said conservative.
Yeah.
I think that you do. I mean, for example, being opposed to packing the court is a conservative view. Like definitionally, that is a conservative view to hold.
Yeah, but I never claimed that I didn't have conservative views. I just hold on. If we're going by that definition, then I have to be a liberal as well for like supporting public option healthcare. I mean, what does that mean? I don't know. I don't know what this argument.
And that's what I was talking about in terms of the content that you put out. I did a quick skim through your videos. I couldn't find any videos where you talked about healthcare. I mean, at least
I can send you multiple. Actually, I think I have one from recent that is, and maybe this has to also do with like the problem of like my, obviously because I have a right-leaning audience, I'm not going to like deny that I do cater to a right-leaning audience because I want to change the right. I mean, because of that, of course, the videos that are going to get bigger are going to be the ones that like are more sympathetic to the right, of course. But like these things do exist on my channel, right?
I mean, would you acknowledge that you probably have more videos that push conservative talking points or conservative viewpoints than you do that push progressive viewpoints or leftist viewpoints?
Yes, but I
fair to say.
Yeah, yes, but I admit this on my channel. Like in multiple videos, I've said. I think even the one that you quoted, where I said I'm right leaning, I talk about this where I say I do have more right leaning like videos on my channel, or videos that are more sympathetic to the right. But I try to present them in a way that maybe isn't always like conservative-esque or whatever, because my goal with my channel is to like try and make the right better, because they've fallen into like this like skepticism like hole that I think is not really productive to politics. I mean, I've talked about this, and so of course I'm going to admit that because I have admitted it before.
Well, real quick, what would you consider? What would you say would be the, I don't know, maybe the tenets or the bullet points of someone you would consider a conservative? Like maybe that we should look at it that way. So like, is there a certain number of boxes you could check?
The definition pulled up.
Go ahead.
Like, because we could, because you say obviously you support public option healthcare. That's more of a liberal stance. As he pointed out, not court packing, or just other, you have other conservative views. Would you say there's a checklist that you would go towards?
Oh, are you asking me, or do you want?
Yeah.
Said, yeah. I don't know if I've necessarily thought about like what would be like the checklist of being like, oh, you're conservative. I think generally when we think of like conservative in politics today, we think of people who, are like capitalists. Not necessarily libertarian, but they're also socially conservative.
Are you not a capitalist?
I am, but I also like advocate for like parts of like a free market, or like I advocate for things that maybe like a social democrat would argue for in certain aspects, not to the extent that a social democrat would, but and then also I'm socially liberal, which is very opposite of what a conservative would be, which would be socially conservative, right?
Yeah, I mean, socially liberal, could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Right.
So like the definition is the holding of political views that favor free enterprise, private ownership, and socially traditional ideas. So I mean, I think that the first two you definitely would fall in favor of those, definitely.
Yeah. Actually,
and I think even in that video where you say you're not a Republican, you do say that you do favor like more traditional ideas. I don't want to misquote that video. Maybe we can like pull it up or something. But
yeah. Well, maybe I can explain that a little bit more, because that probably did that. I will give you this point. That probably was a little bit more confusing. Well, my point with saying that is that like even though on a policy level I'm very like socially liberal, I would say like as far as like where my conservative-ish like viewpoints were more lenient, would more like come apparent, is where like I think in our country we don't like give as much like emphasis on community or like family like values in certain aspects, but that doesn't necessarily mean that affects my policy positions in any way. Like I agree that like gay marriage should be legal, or like abortion should be we should be pro-choice for the time being. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, those honestly though, I feel like it also depends, in my opinion, on how you're coming to those positions, because you can have someone who is a pro-gay marriage, they're pro-choice, they're also against the death penalty, but maybe they're coming to that from a libertarian mindset where they just don't want the government to be involved in certain things, and I'd say that would put them more on the conservative side of things versus someone that's in favor of gay marriage because they just think that gay people should have all the same rights as everybody else. I like, or you are against the death penalty because you think it's like immoral versus you just don't want the government to be in charge of that sort of thing. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get you, and maybe hopefully I'll keep this short because I don't want to get into like a whole like moral argument. But like I try to, as best as I can, try to draw a lot of my ideas from like a Rawlsian political philosophy, which is as we know is like foundational liberalism, right? Also, I want to do one thing real quick. You read off the definition of conservatism and said like, oh, you agree with like at least these two things. And like, for instance, I'll read off liberalism. Liberalism is a political and moral philosophy based on liberty, consent of the governed. Liberals espouse a wide array of views depending on their understanding of these principles, but they generally support free markets, free trade, limited government, individual rights, capitalism, democracy, secularism, gender equality, racial equality, et cetera, et cetera. These are a lot of these things are things that I agree with. So like, I mean, we can play the game like both sides. Like, I mean, you know what I mean?
No, I definitely do get what you mean. I think that's why some people draw the distinction between like classical liberal and the way that we use liberal today, because I agree that these labels are definitely malleable and they mean different things, and I really try not to focus too much on labels. If you don't want the term label to be or the term conservative to be associated with you, I have no problem not calling you conservative. I have no like weird like thing where like I really want to, but I do think that it's something that you should be aware of when you are presenting ideas. That I don't think that based on some of the videos you put out, I don't think I'm the only one to think that you hold more conservative views. This seems to be something that you've encountered multiple times. I mean, that seemed to be why you put out that video saying that you're not a Republican. So I think that you should be conscious of the way that you are being perceived with the content that you put out and the ideas that you're pushing is all that I would say.
Well, sure. That's why I try to keep those videos updated. Like I try to update videos like that. Like the one that you're referring to. I also made a video kind of like that, but even better, like a few days ago, which I think you commented on. You might not have, but I agree that like I need to be aware of it, and I try to. Oh man, there was one other thing I was gonna make, but dang it, I forgot it. But anyway, I guess we can move on. The main reason I wanted to bring this, I don't believe that you're like doing this with harsh intent. My problem is that like people do look at these types of things with harsh intent. You know what I mean? And that the labeling and the putting in boxes is like something that I think is like very, very. It can be very destructive, and I think it only adds to like polarization issues in our country. You know what I mean? And especially on online politics, like I think we can talk. I think it's something that could be talked about. So.
Yeah, definitely. And but I mean, when you say things like you try to put out content that caters to a right wing audience, I think that I think that is almost definitionally trying to push a conservative agenda. It's another way of saying that.
Well, you also, I mean, just to be clear, you can't just leave out the rest of that. I put a qualifier on there. I cater to a right-leaning audience because I want to help change the right, because I don't think they're going in the right direction. I don't agree with everything they be
more progressive, or you just want them to have better arguments?
No, it's not necessarily about better arguments. I think a lot of the things that they believe are the way they get to a lot of the things they believe, I think is very flawed. And I want to help change that. And maybe I guess I could, maybe what you're trying to get at, but maybe you're just not saying it, is that like I could like try and say that better. Maybe I haven't explained that thoroughly, which I could understand that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that like, I feel like I'm going to the extent that maybe you're saying. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. And like I said, I will not call you conservative again. I promise.
No, it's I'm not trying to come at you with like a hammer or like, don't call me. It's an interesting conversation. Labels it's a rough thing in politics.
I think just in general, the terms, liberal or conservative are very broad, because, like as you get more into politics and discover more, you realize how many sections of, liberal and conservative there are, and how, there's everyone on the right calls everyone on the left a liberal, and everyone on the left, for the most part, calls everyone on the right a conservative. And once you really get down into the core tenets of it, it's usually not the correct definition in either case. But just depending on how you look at things and how you arrive to certain points kind of is how you get to what you truly are. And I think a lot of people just put labels on themselves when they don't even really think about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Be an issue.
Maybe I don't know if you have anything else to say, Earl, but I'm down to get into like the really boring stuff now, the court packing, the things that everyone cares about.
Let's jump into it. Yeah.
I already got the thing ready. Bam.
So I started off the last one. You want to start off this one?
Yeah, that's fine. I got a few things that I was going to start off. So I think there's like 4 things that like I would like point to say like court packing is probably not a great idea. Maybe 5 now that I think about it. But so like the first thing would be like I don't think the court is necessarily partisan or like delegitimized, which is the place that I think is the argument I think it hinges that's the argument I think people really hinge their argument for on court packing. It seems like a lot of people are would like to pack the court based on that type of ideology. But and then I guess I also would like for my second point, I'd like to read off a little quote from RBG. She said, "If anything would make the court look partisan, it would be that one side saying, we're in power, we're going to enlarge the number of justices so we could have more people who would vote the way we'd want them to." And so my point with this is that like it seems like if you are trying to make the court less partisan, the solution to that would not be going with a partisan solution. Which is what court packing is inherently doing, right? It's saying we have a supermajority on the court right now. Let's go with a solution that is inherently partisan by just put more liberals on there, so it's not conservative. And then the last 2, really easy. I'll quote one of the things you said. You said Republicans will complain and say it's not fair, but adding more justices is well within the confounds of our system. It's not just Republicans. There's independents that don't like it. In fact, independents like it are just as little as Republicans do.
I should have said conservatives won't like it.
that was good. But that was funny. And then, but yeah, Democrats don't like. There's a lot of Democrats that don't like it either. And so I think I would try to look to political efficacy and political capital. And then lastly, I'll say that like this doesn't mean that I don't think that should be reformed. I think there's really good ways to go about reforming the court that can help a lot of issues. I just don't think this is the one. I don't think this is the solution.
Yeah. All right, nice. So first, let me you talked about other ways of reforming the courts. I am also in favor of term limits. I think term limits would be awesome. I don't know what you think about term limits, but that is another type of reform that I also support. But I think that you made the point about like the court it would make the court partisan. I think that the court is already partisan. I think that you can pretty reliably figure out the way that judges are going to vote based on who appointed them. I think that people have ideological lenses that they view the world. And it's silly to pretend that the court isn't already partisan. And I think that the other thing is that, like, adding justices to the Supreme Court is a political tool, just like holding up someone's appointment for almost a year is also a political tool. I think that when Republicans have been in power, they have exercised the full extent of their institutional power. And I wish that Democrats did the same.
Okay. I'll first say that when I said that I think the court isn't partisan, I'm not saying like I don't think the court's nonpartisan whatsoever, like altogether. I'm saying that I don't think the court is so partisan that we need to look to solutions like court packing to fix it. That's
you would agree that it's 6-3 conservative, though, right?
Oh wait, what? Yeah, of course it's 6-3 conservative. Yeah, no, okay. That was the other thing. I will say, yeah, just that point real quick. I remember in your video you did say like I've seen a lot of conservatives say this, that like, oh, just because the court ruled this way, this must mean they're not conservative. I never said I never believed that. I don't think that they're like just not conservative. Of course it's 6-3 conservative, but I'm just saying like I don't think it's partisan so much to the point where we need court packing to solve that issue. And then
what does that mean though? Like what does that like mean? When would it meet the threshold in your mind to qualify for court packing? Because you're saying that it has to like meet maybe like standard.
Yeah. Well, I would say like it's probably like I would say like supermajority of conservative or liberal, doesn't matter which side, I think can be pretty dangerous. But like as I said, I don't think it's so partisan that we need to go to a solution that is also a partisan solution to fix
That's why
it.
I asked, what is the threshold though where it becomes
Right.
so partisan? If 6-3 conservative is partisan,
I don't know. I don't know if there would be a like threshold that I would say like, oh, well, I guess like just like generally speaking, the threshold would be like, a 6-3 or a 7-1 or 7-2 court conservative that is like actually actively voting on things in a very like dangerous manner, like saying like, I don't know, like gay marriage is legal or illegal, I mean, or like, all really crazy things against civil rights, like, just absolute racist things. If we actually saw evidence of this happening, I would be more open to court packing. But as it sits right now, I will say that, of course, the court is partisan. I just don't think court packing is the solution to that. I think we need to look to other places. But I mean, I don't want to get into those solutions right now because we can talk about that later. But you know what I mean. Maybe we can talk about that later and just talk about like court packing specifically right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you're saying that maybe if they were a little bit more conservative, but like you're not exactly sure how much it would be, that then you would be okay with it. But like, I mean, so for example, I think that, did you oppose the fact that Mitch McConnell held up Obama's appointment for almost a year?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so do you think though, you agree that was wrong? Should Democrats just say, well, that sucks for us. I guess we should just, too bad. I mean, that 3 super young conservative justices have been appointed. It's too bad. Like, is that what Democrats should do? I mean, like, what is the step forward with that? I mean, if you agree that it was wrong, like, I mean, what do you do there?
Yeah. So, as I said, like, just because, I think it was wrong for Mitch McConnell to do that. But like I said, I think, that was a very partisan thing to do. Obviously, Mitch McConnell was acting ridiculously partisan. But I think court packing would be a partisan solution to that. It's literally saying, and it's going like full nuclear. It's like, it's not saying like, oh, let's find a way to where like people can't do this anymore. It's like saying, let's just go turn it up to 11 and like, let's just put liberals on the court because we don't like how many conservatives on the court. I think you can fix this problem in a much more beneficial way. You know what I'm saying?
Such as?
Yeah. Okay. I guess we can get into it. I was trying to hold this off so maybe we could talk about like, the like nitty gritty, but
we can stay on court packing, I guess. I just view court packing as a political tool. I think that it is a tool that is in a politician's toolbox, and that's one thing that they can do to advance the political agenda.
Well, maybe one thing we can talk about real quick is like, is that like the extent of the reason why you think we should try court packing? Is it because you think it is so partisan and so delegitimized that we need to take that step into doing court packing? Is that?
I think it's always been partisan. That's the thing. Is there's certain rulings that you just simply like, depending on how you ideologically view the world, that's how you're going to rule. And I don't buy this idea of like someone being like an originalist. I mean, someone like an example is like Scalia. Scalia was like, he said he was originalist and all this, but he absolutely had like partisan rulings. Like when he was talking about like with drug laws and everything, he would say that it shouldn't be up to the states. It should be completely like that's not something that they should be able to do. It should be the federal government. That's what should be listened to. But then when it was about immigration, he was all in favor of like, forget states or in favor of states' rights in that instance, but not when it came to drugs. I don't think that anybody necessarily is an originalist because we all have different ways that we view the world. And
of course,
a lot of the issues that we're dealing with today weren't even dealt with in the Constitution, and so I don't think that.
Of course, it's partisan. I don't disagree with you, but do you think it's so partisan enough that we need something like court packing to fix it?
I think it's one tool. Like I said, I'm also in favor of term limits. I think the term limits would also be great. If there was like some sort of movement behind getting term limits passed, I would 100% support that. And I think that would probably be a better thing just because you could probably get more people behind that. But I have no problem with court packing. Like it's like a moral neutral for me.
The reason I'm trying to stay away from other solutions is because I think we're already going to agree, and I don't want to just be like.
So do you support term limits?
Possibly. That's like one thing I think I heard a solution once that was like something like if you did like term limits of like 16 years, so that like, and it's like rotating, so like like every president gets like X amount, like gets like 2 appointments every term or whatever. Like I don't think that's like necessarily a bad idea, but I did want to say, like for instance, you were talking about how partisan the court is, and like you were mentioning Scalia or whatever, but like even then, like I still wouldn't agree that like it's so partisan that we could use this tool, because like for instance, like since 2000, there was like an average of like 36% of decisions that were 9-0, which is pretty great. But then even with that, you have like 7-2 and 8-1 judgments. These also made up another 15% of the decisions, whereas 5-4, which is obviously would be like a pretty partisan vote, this only occurred in like 19% of cases. And even in 2016 to 2017, you had like 50% of decisions were unanimous, and then slim majorities, which were like 5-3, 5-4, accounted for only 14%. Like, and so of course I agree it's partisan to an extent. I just don't think it's so partisan that we need to go like full nuclear. Like,
I don't agree that there's some like nuclear option that would just like destroy everything. I think that, you know, we've changed the number of justices that we've had before. You know, it's not like written, you know, in the earth somewhere that there must be 9 justices on the Supreme Court. I think it's, you know, something that's changed before. I think it can change again, especially when there's been so much tomfoolery with the way that these current justices have been appointed. Yeah,
well, the problem is that oh, you said something there that really the reason I think I would say it's nuclear is because it's like, number one, it's an obvious partisan solution to an obvious partisan issue, or
but it's already been obviously partisan. That's the thing, is that Mitch McConnell was already being obviously partisan.
Yeah, of course.
It's already obviously partisan when they put ACP.
Okay.
It's like, if the reason that, like, the lay person, like someone who doesn't pay attention to politics would be like, oh, the court is now political. They already think the court is political.
The reason I don't like this argument is because, like, for instance, I get so annoyed when alt-righters, they're like alt-righters, they'll go to the extreme. They'll be like, you know, like, ban gay people or whatever. And you're like, what is your deal? Like, why are you like going like crazy? And like, you know, and they're like, well, we think the left is going like full nuclear, so of course we're going to fight fire with fire. And it's like, but that doesn't seem to be like an actual solution. Like, you can like fix the system in ways to where it's like better society or whatever. And I'm just talking broadly speaking, where it doesn't, you know, necessarily go like fight fire with fire. I don't think the way to fight the things that like Mitch McConnell did is to go back and say, okay, we're going to like just put more liberals on the court that way.
There's a very clear distinction though with what you just said. What you just referred to though was someone going super far to the right because they feel like people are going super far to the left. That's like an ideological thing. This is an institutional thing. This is a procedural thing.
No, sure. I was just giving an example of how like a lot of like the like cliche fighting fire with fire. If you have like an instance like what's Mitch McConnell, where he's literally like doing some partisan hack stunt, and then you're saying, okay, well, we have too many conservatives on the court. Let's just put a bunch of liberals on there. I don't think it's, well, number one, I don't think it makes sense, and number two, I don't even think it's effective. And so we could get into like political efficacy if you want.
What do you mean by it's not effective?
Well, it doesn't seem to be like it would be something that would be effective. For instance, it seems as though like if you were to do something like this, I could totally see Republicans trying to fire back once they get power again.
They absolutely would, but that's the thing, is they already are doing that. Like it's 6-3 Republicans right now. They're already doing that. Like if it was the other way around, Republicans would absolutely pack the court because that's what they do. Mitch McConnell has no care. He hasn't held a vote on so many things that have been passed by the House. He doesn't care about precedent. He doesn't care about anything. He held Merrick Garland's seat for almost a year, and then they appointed ACP. Like, it was like super fast. Like, he does not care about any of that stuff. If it was reversed, he would absolutely do it.
Do you see my point? You said they're already firing back. That's my point. Is that like you're both sides are saying?
The answer isn't for Democrats to just lay back and just let the
I never said that. I never said they should just lay back. I do think we should have solutions, but the solution shouldn't be something where you know the other side's going to just fire back and like do some other political stunt, a political partisan stunt. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I wish there was a progressive Mitch McConnell who was so willing, who unabashedly just pushed progressive policies. I wish there was someone like that in Congress right now. The right has someone like Mitch McConnell who doesn't care about how he's perceived at all. He is like, what does he have, like a 13% approval rating? He doesn't care though. He will just push conservative politics. I wish there was someone like that for progressives.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we just fundamentally disagree. I don't like the whole like polarization games where it's like, okay, they're going to go crazy. Let's go crazy back.
But I think that, or sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that also has to do with maybe more of a fundamental way that I think I have a problem with the way that you view politics. I think that you like to play a bit of a both sides thing, like, oh, like it's, both sides are right some of the time. Sometimes Republicans are doing, some really good stuff. Sometimes progressives are doing really good stuff. I think that that's a false equivalency. I think that there is very, very clearly, I think that it's okay to have like values and things that you value. And then there are things that you can like push for. I don't think that we need to like pretend that things are neutral when they're very much not. I mean, we have like what is it, over 100 members of the House right now that are within the Republican side that are saying that like there was election fraud, despite the fact that there was no evidence of election fraud, but they're just openly just saying like, oh yeah, it was stolen. Like they've signed on to like something where they think it was a stolen. Like this is like very like there are people talking about secession and everything. Like this isn't like there's no equivalency here.
I've never said that like I'm trying to be neutral for neutral's sake. This is not something I like am doing. The reason I like agree with certain things on maybe both sides is because I have like my own little system of how we should do things, and I think that's the best way to do it. And it happens to like agree with both sides. It's just. But anyway, I guess maybe let's not get off the fence too much. Maybe we could talk about efficacy real quick, because we were starting to get into this and we kind of got off with the Republicans may fire back. One of the other issues I think is that like, well, I guess we'll maybe talk about political capital with efficacy. Let me see. Let me quote this again from you. You said that there's also more justification, or there's more than enough justification for Democrats adding more justices to the Supreme Court. Republicans will complain and say it's not fair, but adding more justices is well within the confines of the system. So some polls, I think this is from Washington Post. They had some polls done or whatever, and it's a 54% majority of Americans oppose increasing the number of justices, and about a third of Americans support adding justices, 32%, while only 12 have like no opinion. And then when it comes down to party, 6 in 10 Republicans and independents alike oppose increasing the number of justices on the Supreme Court, while Democrats only are relatively split, 45 and like 39. And so the issue I think you're going to have is like, even if you wanted to try and do this, I don't think it would, number one, it wouldn't be perceived well, but you'll like be spending all of your political capital, or like Biden, I guess, not necessarily you, but Biden will be spending all of his political capital on this thing that will, could destroy him and Congress, which will only leave you guys without like Congress again. I mean, we saw this with FDR, we saw this with Obama and the ACA.
Well, I think that I get what you're saying. It's not going to happen with this current makeup of Congress and anything, because Joe Manchin has said that he won't vote for adding justices to the Supreme Court. So even if Democrats take the Senate, it's not going to happen this time around. And so I think that there's plenty of time for public opinion to change. I mean, these are lifetime appointments we're talking about. Like, I mean, I wish it was done this time around, but I don't think that it will be. And I also, I do, care about like public approval ratings and everything, but I mean, also the majority of Americans support the death penalty. And I'm opposed to the death penalty. So, I think that there are, places where I break ranks with what the majority of Americans believe. I think that for the most part, my politics do align with the majority of Americans, but I happily acknowledge that there are issues that where the majority of Americans aren't quite where I am.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I bring up the majority of Americans is to say that like, if like a president was to come in and do this, he may very well like spend all of his political capital on trying to get this done, and then it'll potentially lose him the re-election, potentially lose the Congress. Kind of like with what people have said this about like Obama and like ACA. He spent a lot of his political capital on the ACA, and then he literally lost like Congress for 6 years. Also, I wanted to address, you said it won't happen this time around, but like my problem is that like I don't know in which time around it would work. For instance, maybe
2022. If Democrats have a larger majority in the Senate, maybe. But the problem is that like even we had a situation where court packing was proposed in the past. With FDR, and this was like an even better situation than what we have current day. FDR won with 523 electoral votes. He was like super popular. Democrats owned Congress,
And even in this time, with FDR trying to like gather support for court packing, the support averaged about 39%, which is close to what it is today. Opposition to court packing ranged from like a low of 41% to like a high of 49%. And on average, 46% of each sampled. I'm reading this off. Oh, okay, sorry, that part wasn't important. But like my point is like this point when FDR like tried to bring up court packing was like the prime time to bring up court packing, and even then he couldn't get it through.
I would disagree, though. That's not analogous to today, because you didn't have. I mean, I would say that you can make the argument that two of the justices on the Supreme Court, with ACV and then with who did he appoint in place of Garland? Was it Gorsuch? Was it Gorsuch? Who's the person that's Gorsuch? Yeah, Gorsuch. With Gorsuch and ACB. I mean, those are two. I wouldn't call it illegitimate because it was within the confines of our system. But those are two justices that were appointed via political, partisan means, if that's how you want to refer to it. I don't believe that was the case when FDR was pushing for court packing. I believe that the reason FDR was pushing for it was just that they kept slapping down his New Deal stuff.
Right, but that doesn't change the support and opposition. Like these stats that I'm reading off, they're almost identical to what it is today. And because I'm saying that the conditions can change, though, if people are presented with the fact that, like, maybe not everybody maybe not everyone remembers the fact that Mitch McConnell blocked Obama's appointment for almost a year. Like, I think that that's something that can be brought up. Maybe people don't know about the fact that ACV was pushed through so fast. Like, I think that there are, campaigns that can be run around these things, and we can, it's not a top priority for me, but I definitely think it's a Well, but yeah, potentially, if like more people like genuinely understood what Mitch McConnell did, maybe it could raise a little bit more support, potentially. But even then, like you have half the country Republicans who, most of them will probably not budge. I mean, a lot of these people love Mitch McConnell, even though he kind of sucks. And not only that, you had FDR, who had so much support, like he was so popular, and someone with that much support should have been able to like move the line a little bit and be like, court packing really isn't that big a deal. Congress wouldn't budge for him, and like the support in the public wouldn't budge for him either.
I don't think that these things are, written in stone, though. I think that they can change. I think that approval for these things, I mean, we can look at the support of a number of issues. I mean, we can look at the support for gay marriage and how that's changed over time, the support for legalization of marijuana. I mean, these things do change over time. Like, I think that, there are certain things that, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, that, especially also, if we want to get into, how fair it is or whatever, for it to happen, you would need to hold the presidency and both chambers of Congress. And so, like, that is like, I don't want to say like a mandate from the people or whatever, but you know what I mean? That would seem like there's a pretty solid consensus for an agenda to be pushed forward. And if there is a court that is, I mean, basically unaccountable to the people, if you have a court where three of the justices that were put on the court was nominated by a president that was not elected by the majority of the people and approved by the Senate that does not represent the majority of American people, I think that there is a case to be made that if Democrats control the presidency of both chambers of Congress, that they can push some stuff through.
Right. I mean, well, FDR had both sides of Congress too. And I did want to say, you said things like these things can change. The support for this type of thing can change. And I do agree. The problem is that like this, I mean, the support for or the opposition to court packing is like similar to what it was FDR. And that was like what, like 90 years ago.
I mean, yeah, but people haven't really like run on court packing or anything like that.
No, that's true.
That's tried to do it, and it was like I just don't buy the idea that like your public opinion, if public opinion is going to be stagnant forever, then I mean, there's very little purpose in what either of us do trying to change people's minds. Right. Obviously, people's minds can change.
Yeah, no, I agree. Maybe it will, but even then, I mean, we already talked about it. I don't think it's a great idea, and so I guess. Unless you have anything else that can bring us to where we may agree.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So like I said, the term limits that I've heard of, they might be a good idea. The ones I proposed, I don't know if you have any interesting ones. The one I really like is called the court lottery, and this comes from Yale Law Journal. I don't know if have you heard of this?
No, not it.
Okay. I'll read it off real quick. I'll read off like the first paragraph because it summarizes it pretty well. I think it's pretty interesting, and then I'll explain like the three points of like why what problems it would be fixing. We call our first proposal the Supreme Court lottery. Under this reform, every judge on the federal courts of appeals would also be appointed as an associate justice on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court would hear cases as a panel of 9, randomly selected from all the justices. Once elected, the justices would research and prepare cases from their home chambers before traveling to Washington. To take oral arguments for 2 weeks. So, after which another set of justices or judges would replace them. The panel members would then return to their home chambers to complete their opinions. By law, each panel would be prohibited from having more than 5 justices nominated by a president of a single political party. That is, no more than 5 Republicans or Democrats at a time. So, number one, just off that last sentence, this would get rid of supermajority, which is what we have right now, right? So that fix your one problem, which you might want for court packing. The Supreme Court confirmations would be less partisan and politicized, which obviously we were probably all annoyed with, like how politicized the Senate hearings were with ACB. And this would probably take care of the concerns with lifetime appointments. So I think this is I haven't heard really anything that would go against this, but I think it's pretty cool idea.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's a little technocratic in the way that, like, whenever I hear like super specific stuff like that, like I'm always hesitant to get like too invested in it, just because it's like, like what are the chances of it actually gets passed in like that specific way that you want it to, you know what I mean? So like, I nothing really jumps out to me like right away as like being inherently wrong with that though.
Yeah, this is maybe a little more like maybe a little harder.
More wishful thinking, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's a really cool idea. Something that at least could be talked about more, so that maybe like at some point, like you said, people can change and come to understand things like this. So maybe that'd be something that happens in the future. But even then, on top of that, we could at least start talking about what is already being talked about, which is term limits, kind of like the one I had talked about. I think that would be a really interesting one, but.
Well,
so to kind of
to
kind of just sum up a little bit, would you say? I mean, obviously, Karl thinks that as an institution, the court is broken. I would say, would you agree with that? Would you say you would agree with that, or disagree with, like, as we do the court? Because obviously you're open to solutions, but would you say, as it sits now, like the Supreme Court works as it was intended to, or is it a broken system?
You're talking to me, right? Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I would say there's issues, and that's kind of like why I like something like this court lottery, which tries to address those issues that I specifically think are problems. But I wouldn't say it's broken. And maybe, possibly, it's getting to the point where it's broken. But even then, that would be based on like what the court right now is going to rule on in the future, and all of that is speculative. And so we don't necessarily know, but I wouldn't say it's broken.
I also feel like it's the court is almost. I don't like the way that it is right now, but in some ways it is working in how it was supposed to be set up. I don't like how insulated the court is from the people, and I think that's one thing. Like term limits would be a good thing, because then you have more turnover, you have more justices that are more accountable to people. I don't like the idea of this this body that's pretty separated from people. Like when you have someone that's appointed when they're 40, I mean they could serve there for decades, and the idea that they're not accountable to anybody, besides, I guess they could be impeached, but I don't think that's super beneficial.
I don't think it's ever even happened, has it? Maybe once.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what else to talk about.
That's why I just want to know if you guys had any other things that you were like sticking points or.
Yeah, I mean, the place where I think we may just never agree is that I don't see how you would look at something like court packing and say like, oh, but it's already everything's already partisan with getting people in the court, and be like, let's just do a partisan thing to get back at them. Like we know that Republicans are probably going to try and fire back if we do it. I don't know. It just seems very silly to me.
But I mean, that's kind of like what politics are. Politics are people, trying to advance a political agenda. You know what I mean? That's the thing. And, that's kind of like what I was talking about before with like, kind of like both sidesism. This idea that like, bipartisanship for the sake of bipartisanship. And, I'm not saying that that's what you're like necessarily doing, but I'm just saying, I think that that is why these institutions exist, is for people to push partisan agendas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure, but I mean, I think the problem I have is that like with certain things that are so partisan or partisan in a way that we would like to fix them, if we can come up with a solution, I think it's better to try that. I mean, that's why we're having this discussion in the first place, is that we think that there are different ways that we can try and fix the partisan issues of the court, right? And so, I don't know if like just waving off and saying like, oh well, everything's partisan,
Well, I don't
and
think that you can fix that as partisan. I think it's always going to be partisan because people are partisan. People have
yeah,
values.
To a certain extent, sure. But what I'm trying to say is that like, I think it is partisan right now. I think packing the court will make it more partisan. That's my issue. Like that, if you think of it like as just a gradient, I think that's where the issue comes in. Like I'm not, obviously
how would it make it more partisan than what it is right now?
Because right now you have a system in place of confirming up to 9 justices. Of course, they're on lifetime, so it depends on when someone dies. But you have the system, and then the only partisan part about it is the confirmation of it, right? And whether like someone holds it up or whatever. If you add this extra element, you're now adding an element that says, okay, well now if we don't like how the court looks, as far as how many conservatives or how many liberals are on the court, now because we're in power, we're going to add more, and now.
But I don't see how that makes it more partisan when we already agreed that the majority that conservatives currently hold was gained through partisan ways. So how does making it another majority, just a different majority, make it more partisan? I would say it's equally partisan, but it's not more partisan.
I would say it's more partisan.
Is there anything, do either of you think there's anything we could do as an add-on to our current system that could make it less partisan? I mean, there's always going to be the political back and forth. I'm in the majority, you're in the majority. But is there something that we could do to our system to make it less partisan?
Well, if you have any, there is also. I mean, I don't know if the term limits, the 16-year term limits, would make it less partisan necessarily. I have another idea I've heard of. I don't know if you do, Carl, unless you want me to go.
No. Let me hear it.
I've also heard of like. I don't know exactly to the extent of like of how it works, but it's called. I think it's just ranked choice voting, and so essentially, you add term. I think you would add term limits first, and then you do the confirmations are based on like a ranked choice. You have like a set of so many like justices, and the idea is to do a ranked choice, and so that you try and get more like moderate type of justices on the court. And obviously, that could help.
For when you elect them, I don't like. I know what ranked choice voting is, but I don't. How would you use it?
Yeah. Ranked choice voting. That I've always heard that used in a much different way.
Right. It would be ranked choice, but in like the confirmation of the Senate. Like the Senate would be doing a ranked choice system on a set group of justices that are laid before. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Yes.
Okay.
So I mean, obviously, it's just yes, but see, it's just yes or no, though, right? So how ranked choice would usually be like there's three candidates, and no one gets 50%. You knock out the number 3, and then like that. Like I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess the idea would be that like it wouldn't be one person that you're focusing in on and saying like, oh, like half the aisle hates this person, half the aisle hates this person. Now you have a set group of people, and the goal is, or at least the goal of creating the system. Like I said, I don't know to the full extent of this system. I've only heard it talked about, but you have multiple people, not just one person, and multiple they have multiple. Some of these people have different leanings, and the idea of the system would be to hopefully get some more moderates on the bench. And so, that's just one idea. Like I said, probably didn't explain it as great as I've heard it, but.
Gotcha.
That is definitely in it. I still don't, at least with, we don't have to spend too much time on it, but I just feel like with the way it was explained, I don't see how that would still become partisan. That's the thing, is I feel like whatever way you do it, it's always going to be partisan. How we do it right now is partisan.
Yes, but my point is that, like, I'm not just looking at, it's not just a yes or no, is it partisan or is it not? It's a gradient. I mean, at least that's the way I'm looking at it, is that, like, I think if you add all these elements of, you know, what we could do, I think court packing would add another element of really partisanship of the court. What? Go ahead.
I don't understand how, when we acknowledge that 2 of the justices were added with purely partisan. There was purely ACB and Gorsuch were purely partisan in their appointments. How would adding justices be more partisan when we just agreed that the first 2 were also just is purely partisan the way that they got on the court?
Yes, I'll try and explain it. Like, I don't know how many other ways I could try and explain it, but I'll try to do my best. The point I'm trying to make is that, yes, these 2 instances were partisan, but then now what you're getting is that, like, you're going to have this partisan system of confirming justices in the Senate. But then if one party is in power and they don't like this person that got in here on a partisan basis, now they're going to use partisan tactics to try and get who they want to on the court.
But that's what the Republicans already did, though. That's why I don't get this, like, more partisan. Republicans already used partisan tactics to make sure that a conservative justice got on the court. And so, like, it's not more or less partisan, it's equally partisan. And I feel like that's the sticking point right here.
Okay. Yeah, we can keep
You're basically just saying it'll escalate more is what you're trying to get at, Matt. Is that kind of what you're saying, that it'll just escalate further?
It's going to escalate further because
kind of thing.
I would guess so,
to an extent, yeah. But, like, the problem is that you already have these issues where there's, like, all the public going on, and then it's going to escalate into now where it's always going to be a fight for power as well, so that we can, put as many justices we can on the court that they agree with us. It seems like it's just a bad idea that will, as he said, maybe that was a better way of explaining it. It's like,
but isn't it already a fight for power?
Well, yes.
Conservatives have won the fight as of right now.
Do what? Sorry, say that again.
It's already a fight for power, though. Just conservatives have won up to this point.
Of course, but this gives you a new layer of, like, trying to fight for power. Before, like, the fight for power is, like, totally based on a confirmation vote in the Senate. You do it this way, and now
which are partisan officials voting in terms of their partisan,
well, I don't know what the point of saying that was. Of course, I already agree with that. What I'm trying to say is that then now you're adding on this new layer of trying to just add on more justices until oblivion. I don't know. Like, I mean, the idea of this is just, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me.
All right, then. I think it's just it's a convenient way for conservatives to be like, I just feel like a lot of not you, you're not conservative, but for people to say that what Mitch McConnell did was bad, but that we can't do anything, or you do say that we can't do term limits. Your Yale thing, you did say we could do your Yale thing, but I just think it's a way to say I disagree with what McConnell did, but here we are, and I think that it's
well, that's not what I'm doing. That's not what I'm doing.
Not, but
and
I think
whether you disagree with me or not on if it makes it more partisan to do court packing, you have to understand that, like, I'm not sitting by and saying, like, oh, we don't have things we could fix about the court. Especially with in reaction to what Mitch McConnell did. I'm not one of these other people LARPing, conservatives that are, like, trying to say, oh, Mitch McConnell did it. Oh, well, that rascal. I'm saying that, like, we got to fix things. I just think that packing the courts, especially when it's so unpopular, I think it has issues.
Probably the best idea I've heard, and tell me what you guys think of this, actually came from Pete Buttigieg, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but his idea was 15 judges, 5 associated with Democrats, 5 associated with Republicans, and then another 5 picked by the first 10. And that would make up the court. So 15 judges, 5 picked from, 5 Democrat nominated, 5 Republican nominated. Those 10 justices pick 5 centrists, whoever they see fit, and that would make up the court.
I've heard that idea too, actually. I
see what I mean, though, by like adding something that makes the situation less partisan. That's kind of what I was talking about. I mean,
no, I like that. I like that idea too. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to like, seeing where that goes. But
it's interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a crazy situation, and I feel like the Supreme Court was like the last bastion of things we made like made like a big spectacle of it being nonpartisan, and made this show out of it, and now it's full on dogfight partisanship, and it's a shit show.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything else. I don't know how else I could explain what I'm saying. I just think, and maybe we could just stop with that. I don't. What?
Explain it 3 different ways right now.
Okay, well, I'll try. I just, I don't like the idea of adding on another layer. To
well, Matt, you know why you don't like it, don't you?
Why is that?
Because you're conservative. No, just kidding.
That's great.
Conserve the way the court is now.
He wants to conserve it. I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, it's a tricky issue, and yeah, I mean, I think we went through some. I like that Yale thing though. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But personally, trying to get anybody in Congress to think outside the box is a whole nother issue. But
it's probably true. Probably true.
All right. Well, yeah. So, I don't know, anything else you guys want to go over, or no? Shaking
Matt,
or stirred?
I was going to ask Matt why he supports a public option instead of Medicare for all, but maybe that's for another day.
Well, I mean, very broadly speaking, and I haven't gone into healthcare too much, but it is something that I'm looking more into, especially lately. I think one of the issues with Medicare for all is that, like, well, number one, we kind of almost same argument with this, is that political capital. I don't know who has the political capital to do that nurture right now. I mean, the ACA, Obama needed a ridiculous amount of political capital just to get the ACA passed, and that was nothing close to Medicare for all. And not only that, generally when we talk about like programs like this, public options or public provided options like this, I think one of the issues is that, like, if you have like 100 people in a room, and you have like the varying like economic scale, it's harder to try and find all of the money to provide a service for all of them than to try and take money, like as far as like progressive tax or whatever, try and take money from the top down to try and fit in the spots. I just think a public option probably makes more sense.
Well, public option would probably be more expensive though. You keep our private insurance system, which is rather expensive, and then you would just add on like a whole bunch of additional costs in the public domain versus Medicare for all, which would just be public expenditures.
Potentially, maybe we'd have to have a little more long discussion. Like I said, I don't know everything on this. This is something I know this much about, but I really think is a good idea to talk about. I'm not going to try and act like I know like a ton about it. I mean, maybe I could be swayed on Medicare for all. As far as right now,
another debate for another day, right?
Yeah, another day.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, no, I think we made some progress there as far as ideas for court packing. I don't know if somebody wants to send this stream to Joe Manchin and the crew up in DC, and maybe they'll take our words for it. Or take our advice. Shout out to Angie and Sasha, by the way, in every single stream, no matter what. Y'all are fucking superheroes. That just
I like what they've been saying in the chat.
They're based.
That's funny.
And yeah, well, God damn it, something I was gonna add there at the end.
Oh yeah. Remember.
But
Jim Jones, you seem very intellectual. I'll give you that. Sorry, I was just watching
the actual chat. Jim Jones, like the cult.
Probably
wasn't that like the Kool-Aid guy, Jim Jones?
I think so. Actually, I think that was his name. Yeah.
But all right, yeah. So that was productive talk. Thank you guys for coming on, and hopefully, everybody else out there, I'll probably be back streaming, probably not tomorrow, the day after, starting to feel a little bit better on this whole COVID end. So maybe not tomorrow, maybe the day after, I'll do another stream. And of course, many videos in between that. God damn, there was some video or something I was going to show you guys, and now I cannot remember for the life of me what it was, and it's really pissing me off. But anyway, all right. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming. And